I actually haven't bought any new Magic cards for like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years. I occasionally play Magic with my friends. It's been happening a lot less lately just because running one's own business takes up time that is unexpected, or trying to be more involved in like the local music scene. So I'm like going to shows and stuff. And also I didn't have a driver's license for a while, but all of that to say is like, I've managed to not let Magic the Gathering take all my money.
That's good.
However, Mtg Arena, which is like a good app on computer, but it's also on iOS, which is a problem because anytime I am like, rendering audio or something, which like takes a long time, I'll pull out my phone and like play a quick game of Magic. So it's like, it's been a problem.
Yeah, I've just gotten into playing any games on my phone. I was a firm believer in phones are gonna stop having games.
Right. Mobile gaming isn't real gaming.
Yeah. I almost wish that was the case, but I play one game. It's like a pinball game. Yeah. It's something to do.
Let me tell you about MTG Arena. It's kind of buggy sometimes, but it's also just Magic the Gathering on your phone.
That's true. I think it was wasn't it Hearthstone that really got was Hearthstone mobile first, or was it on PC?
I think it was PC and then it went to mobile. But I mean, like, Blizzard can.
I just remember it got massive at some, and I think it's probably still massive, but I remember mobile. That was one that really put card games on in front of people constantly.
Sure. Yeah. And Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire, like another just top-notch card video game, which I think then started like a whole slew of like card-based roguelikes, which is so interesting.
Did you ever play Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories?
I did not. Kingdom Hearts I was a Xbox kid.
Oh, okay.
And so the PS2 and Nintendo stuff like missed me, which is also kind of weird, just like how immersed I am in nerd culture that like, Mario and Zelda are missing from my like nerd lexicon, and Kingdom Hearts is missing from my nerd lexicon, and just like weeb lexicon. So
yeah, you don't need Kingdom Hearts. No one needs Kingdom Hearts. Even people who love Kingdom Hearts at this point, they're all crying about Kingdom Hearts 3, which is a strange trip. But yeah, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories had the card game-ish sort of mechanic, which is really interesting. That's what that made me think of.
I know it has like a whole like gummy ship thing in it, which is just, I don't know.
It's something else. It's wild. It just, and anytime you can get Goofy and Sephiroth in one place is, I mean, it's insane that it happened. It's crazy that,
and it's insane that it's still happening.
Yeah. Yes.
And I mean, so many good like memes come out of it, or just like it's insane. I've tried like just lightly foraying into it. There was a time where I was like working on some stuff that like I was able to just have stuff on in the background. And so I was like, oh, there's just like video games that I've missed. And so I would have like, like the movie version on YouTube, like playing on like one of these other screens. And then I like tried with Kingdom Hearts, and I was like, No,
it's really not worth it. It's not worth it. Yeah, but movie games, games of movies is such a wonderful thing that's come out of YouTube and the internet in general. It's wonderful.
Right. I mean, like, I feel like I've enjoyed the Uncharted series and the Last of Us series without having to like play them as games, which I feel like almost worked better just as, you know, these like 8-hour experiences.
Yeah, some of it, especially Uncharted, those are like the perfect backseat games anyway. You know, they're the movies model after movies, and they work as movies. It's awesome.
Which is such a strange thing, like snake eating its own tail, that like Uncharted, inspired by Indiana Jones, you know, makes a series of games that gets popular enough, and then they want to make, or they're making it is coming out a movie of Uncharted, but it's like movies to games to movie.
It's the wonderful circle of capitalism. Yeah. It's wonderful.
It doesn't wrap back around though, because
that's true.
There's no good.
I can't think
game
of
movie.
Yeah, I can't think of an example, but there have been movies based on games based on movies based on games. There has to have been at least one example, but nothing comes to mind. And yeah, you're right there. None of them are good. Absolutely none of them would be good.
I feel like maybe there's like a stretch of like, you know, comic books to games to movies to games or something like that. Like, I mean, the Spider-Man 2 movie game.
Oh yeah.
Was good. Probably nostalgia is coloring my judgment of that, but like my memory basically makes it like the PS4 Spider-Man.
I have not played it since I was a child, so I assume it's good, and I've also just the general, you know, consensus is that the Spider-Man games are pretty good. Yeah. Pretty good.
What is like, you know, since we are just nerding out about like video games now, what is like your peak video games?
My peak video games. Oh my gosh. I don't know. I think of the experiences of playing games. Like I struggle with picking favorites. But I think my favorite experience of a game was Metal Gear Solid 4. I got to the Shadow Moses section as it was snowing outside. So it was like I really felt like connected with the game at that point. I'll never forget that. Yeah. So I think Metal Gear Solid 4, and I usually say Metal Gear Solid 4 is my favorite game, just as a stand-in.
Yeah. For me is Transistor. Ooh. Which I play a lot of indies. I don't know if Transistor.
I saw it. Yeah. I haven't beaten it yet, but I've started. Same with Hades. I've not beaten Hades yet, but
Supergiant can do no wrong. It seems
absolutely.
They never make sequels. They just decide to make a new cool thing with beautiful art and beautiful music, beautiful stories, and just knock it out of the park every time.
Every single time.
Do it.
Yeah, my first one, and I assume your first one also was Bastion. Was that the first game? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bastion was just, what a journey. That was when I was like super into games. And I didn't mention this. There was a time when I wanted to be a games journalist, and that was about that time. But yeah, Bastion was just such a wonderful game. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of games journalism, like I do have just like a large part of my brain is dedicated to like video games and like video game journalism. Like I listen to like 4 video game podcasts, like 5, 6. And so mostly IGN stuff, but like No Clip as well as
No Clip's great. Yeah.
Oh but like I'm a composer because of video games. Like I do write songs and make music that way, but like I got into like producing music because I want to make music for video games. Even if I only ever end up doing like one game, I at least want to just like try that, because game music is so unlike recording music because of the dynamic nature of it. And so as far as like game music goes, the like peak example of what makes game music to me is Portal 2.
Portal 2.
Not just because like the music is good, because the music is good, but because it uses the medium of video game music to its fullest. It has like triggers that happen based on what the player is doing. There's always sort of like a sub track that's playing in certain areas. Like whenever you're on like the bouncy goo, like there's a little thing that like plays every time that you hit it, and it's always in time because it's like always in there. Same with like the faith plates and like the speed gel. And whenever you go into like a Ratman den, there's like a voice in the mix or whatever. And as you get closer to his paintings, like it just uses the canvas of video game to its fullest.
It's really cool to be, it makes you part of the process. And I'm just looking at how that's made. That's something that really, as someone who's, I'm not super educated on the technical side of that. I only know music as music, with just notation and stuff like that, but I don't know how to program that. That level of thinking is so incredible. And it still requires creativity. It's like the technical side is not completely, destroyed the creativity. That's game composers are just like something else.
Yeah. Well, that's a thing about, I experienced this in just like music spheres, is that there are people that lean heavily into the intuitive side of just like, yeah, let me just feel out the music. The songs just come to me and like, I just write what comes to me. And then there's like the other side, which is like super technical. And it's like, oh, I made a computer program that like generates melodies, and then I pick the coolest ones of those, and then I turn that into a thing, and it's like a whole immersive experience thing. But like I didn't actually like do anything, but I did because I made the system that generated the. So it's like there's those extremes, and I actually use both. Like
yeah, I've really come to respect that that technical side. Just that. It requires a whole different skill set than what I experience, than what I use, I guess. But that really is art. I tried messing around with the VCV rack. It's like a simulated rack. I tried messing around with it, and I started to feel a little bit of the art in putting wires together. And it's that's really impressive. Really impressive side of music.
Oh, I'm guessing that's just virtual control voltage. Is probably what that,
yeah. I think that's what it stands for. Yeah.
And even just like analog synthesis is a world that I understand it, and it's there, but I don't have the money nor time to really get into that. Yeah. Especially whenever it's like, yeah, if you just have like a library full of, like what you were saying, like, oh, snare sounds, just like getting the snare sounds right and picking the right one. It's like, that's fine. But like, once you get into like, oh, I have like a signal generator and I'm going to turn that into a snare. I do that every once in a while. If I'm just like, none of these sound good, I will just like, all right, let me finesse a snare sound or a kick sound or whatever, but like hardly ever am I just making stuff literally from scratch.
Yeah, that is not me. But I've met sort of these goblins who find numbers beautiful, which is so strange to me. But I guess if you find numbers beautiful, then that's your way into music, is to start messing around with codes and wires. And I guess if that's beautiful to you, then that's beautiful to you.
Yeah. Well, there's actually there's a composer that his name's Milton Babbitt, and he was a mathematician, and he got into music because he like saw the like math in it. And do you know about 12-tone serialism? It's a whole, yeah. And so he was like, ooh, this is a cool way of using number systems to like generate music. And so it sounds awful. All 12-tone serialism sounds just the worst, but it's cool for generating music. And if you like want to like sit down and analyze it, like there's some cool number stuff happening in there, but it doesn't sound good.
That reminds me of I was teaching some kids English. Was it English or creative writing? Not English. Creative writing, and they just hated the Lord of the Rings, and I could not, like, my brain could not fathom why would you not love this perfect thing, and obviously I'm just not seeing it from their perspective. Like, it's boring. So I think maybe that's what people like. It's like for people who are like Babbitt, like, why don't you love these numbers? Come on, just love these numbers. I love these numbers.
Yeah, it's like you're not producing any emotion with this. It's like there is a way to enjoy the music. I understand that. And so I always ask the question, like, is there such a thing as bad music? And it's like, no, because all musical experiences are subjective. But also, what I prefer is to, have some sort of emotional connection with the music.
There's Bill Evans did a performance, I think it was of Nardis, and there's a video on YouTube where he says that he says, you wouldn't call a baby, we say music is expression, right? But a baby crying is expressing, the baby's expressing themselves. But we wouldn't call that art. So usually what he called for was like some sort of guiding aesthetic, like force, like there's something, you're trying to do something. You might not know what you're trying to do, but you're trying to do something, and it's all going towards that force.
Yeah. Through my musical studies, the simplest broken down definition of music that we have come down to is just sound with intent. Sound plus intent equals music. So baby crying, not necessarily music. Recording a baby crying, playing it back to people, being like, look at this music I recorded. Definitionally, yes, it is music. However much skill it took to make that music is where the the analysis might, but as far as like really just nailing down like what is music, sound, intent.
That's a good definition. I've never.
But it gets harder once you like, keep breaking it down. I was having an argument with my brother about this, and he was like, yeah, but like, that's not good music. I was like, well,
I mean, it's the same, it's the same with anything. You break down literally anything. When you start breaking things down, we break down the language we're using to define things. It's like, it's endless. It's fun also, but it is endless.
Right. Well, I'm sure that for you as an English major, you analyze words and sequence of words and the combinations of words to death.
Yeah. I try not to be too, iambic pentameter almost killed me. Like whenever things have to be organized in a certain way and you have to understand things in a certain way, my brain just breaks down. I like poetry and the aesthetic of poetry. I don't like the numbers. And right now I'm at the happiest point in my education, which is now we're just talking about nothing is real.
Sure, yeah.
Everything is made up. So it's all fun.
Yeah, it's really liberating to get to that point. I mean, so I got my master's in music composition, and so yeah, it does kind of get to that point at like the really, really advanced level of like, I've considered a doctorate, maybe, I don't know, but like on the doctoral level, it's just like nothing is real. Do what you want. Like, and I mean, even that to an extent is like, whenever I like would tell people, oh, I'm working on my master's in music composition, they're like, whoa, master's, that's a big deal. And like, no, I could literally fart into a microphone and like come into my composition lesson and be like,
if you can justify it,
exactly. And that's the whole thing is, so I'm sure maybe at this point you could like turn in a blank essay or something and like explain to your teacher why.
I think I'm almost there.
Exactly. And it's like, well, I'm like protesting the like tyranny of a grading system. So if you give me an F, you're only proving my point.
I've almost reached that point, like just protesting the way we know things. Like I had a moment where I was like, the way we learn is we're literally this is one of the most insane thoughts I ever had. It's like we're annexing everything into ourselves. We are just devouring everything we don't know we want to know. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's good. So I thought, is there another way of knowing? Is there a way to know without trying to conquer things? Yeah. And I have no answer for that. I have no answer for that.
So this is a very cool and specific rabbit hole that you somehow just went down. So one of the podcasts that I work on is about books, but the guy that was a guest on it, his name is Tiokasin Ghost Horse. He's a Native American speaker, musician, whatever. And they were talking about like sort of how Native American history, like indigenous people have sort of been here, and how archaeology and educational systems and structures have sort of tried to delegitimize the indigenous people that have been here like pre-Clovis, even though like the archaeological record like says that like no, anything before this time it's just like this people, there's no one else. This is the last time that the land bridge was available, and like this is the only way that people could have been here because it's like they had to come from somewhere else. And it's like like all of these things about just the understanding of what the structure of humanity and culture in the United States for indigenous people is sort of grounded in this like Western view of like conquerors and conquered. And so we dissect to know, and we kill to dissect.
That is going to be, I'm going to use that. That's useful. That is a useful, because I've been trying to figure out like how do I define what I mean, but that sums it up. That is. Yeah, so what podcast is that?
It's called Book Society. But like really just listen to that episode, which Tiokasin Ghost Horse, if you just like type it into Spotify, Tiokasin Ghost Horse, Book Society, Tiokasin. Tiokasin is a weird word to spell, but And then ghost horse. I think we can figure out how to spell ghost horse. But, yeah, like the ideas in that. For example, like the Lakota language doesn't have nouns or tenses. And so everything is in a state of being rather than things that can be owned or that can belong to someone or someone being a thing. Like there are no beings that are things. We're just concepts happening through time. And that's how like the language is.
that's a really cool wow, that's a really cool way of thinking. Wow.
Yeah, and it's like it fucking blew my mind too, because I'm like, what? How do you even? And that's the thing. It's like we're so like we were born in it, raised by it, you know, and so yes, and so like it's really hard to like fathom what a language without nouns necessarily, or like time in a here, future, past, like it doesn't have that. Everything is transient and moving, and time is just, you know, the sort of like fourth dimensional time point of view of understanding. And that's, yeah.
That reminds me of Arrival.
Yeah.
That concept. Yeah. Wow.
But like, yeah, going back to what you said about like, we're trying to annex knowledge and just conquer it into ourselves, is like, we could just embrace the wisdom that is and be a part of it, or also just acknowledge the things that we don't know instead of trying to conquer those things too. But that's a weird thing about like scientific discovery too, is because we are trying to like figure it out.
We do want to know, but what if we didn't want to know? Like I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's the struggle, obviously, of like, there are unknowable things, but we can't know that they are unknowable. No knowns, known unknowns, unknown unknowns.
How do we get there? I don't know where we turned.
Oh, you were talking about like learning. Yeah. How did you get to that point? Actually,
we were actually watching. This was we were doing a media analysis of The Matrix, and that just kind of, when she was describing how we're going through, we've read through Saussure, some Nietzsche, and stuff like that, and it just sort of just lined up with my understanding of how colonialism and how imperialism works. We're just eating, bringing everything into yourself and dominating everything, and it was just lining up with that definition. And I was just curious, like, is there a way to know without are there other ways of knowing? Like, I've been asking those kind of questions all semester. Yeah. So it's just where my brain is.
Experiencing, I feel like, is because in school, there's just like a person up front, and they're like, there's this information. You can find it in books, and I'm going to tell you to find it in the book. And then once you come here, I'm just going to retell you the stuff that you should have found in the book, but you didn't. Because who actually reads all of the material?
No one.
I have a master's degree. I didn't read all of the material. Come on.
I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if it's even like the amount of stuff at this point. I really don't know if it's possible.
Right. Because we have to have like fucking part-time jobs and like commute to school and all that. No, there's no way. Plus there's just like too much media to consume otherwise.
Yeah. It's always something on.
I could read Great Expectations in high school, or I could play video games.
Yeah.
And when you ask a teenager to choose between those two things, I think we know the answer.
I had to read Henry James a few semesters ago, and that was physically painful. Like, that's the first experience of reading something where I've just been so bored. I can only define it as boring. Maybe it's just maybe I just don't relate. Okay, I won't define it as boring. I'll say I cannot find a way into it. I'll say that because some people enjoy it somehow. So there must be something in there for them. But nothing in it, as far as I have read, there's nothing in it for me.
What are your requirements? That's a weird thing I've never actually fathomed this question, but like, because I was talking to my wife about it, and like, you know, we watch a bunch of like film analysis, YouTube and stuff like that. And it's something that I greatly appreciate about horror. And I'm not really like that into the genre anyways, but like horror doesn't care to explain, just that it is, and the characters are dealing with this. And so like, why is there a demon man going into people's dreams and killing them through their dreams? It's like, well, it doesn't matter, but it's scary that it's happening, right? And the things that happen because of that is interesting.
Horror is really interesting. Like you say, are you not interested in it, or are you more interested in talking about horror than watching horror?
I think so. I'm more interested now in watching it. For the longest time, I was more afraid of it than what it actually is. And so it's kind of funny. I like got into horror the backwards way, in a strange way. So the movie Mother was marketed as a horror film. The Jennifer Lawrence one.
Mother. Oh, yes. Okay. Okay.
It was like marketed as a horror film, but I also saw lots of people like discussing it as like, not really. And so like it was on Amazon Prime, and I was like, hey, I'll watch that. Sure. And like, what the fuck? I don't know if you remember that movie, but like
I've seen bits and pieces, and I can only suss it out. I assume there's something in there that I will blow my mind once I eventually watch it. It's
sort of like an exponential arc that like the first, I don't know, like 2/3 of the movie are sort of like a slow rise, and then on the last part of it, it just like explodes into madness. It's great. And so I was like, well, that was horrifying in a brilliant and beautiful way. I think I'm capable of experiencing this.
Yeah.
And so for the longest time, I was like afraid of horror movies because of like, I was afraid of being scared. And then the other way around it is that getting really into film and like special effects and stuff. And so instead of being horrified by like the blood and gore on screen, more of like, I wonder how they did that. Oh, that's a cool effect. Oh man, that looks really good. So I think that also allowed me to like have a degree of separation to where it's like, it's not just horrifying or scary, or it's not going to eke its way into my dreams.
Yeah.
But more so of like, what are the ideas that are being explored here? And so then I like went to Hereditary. And that's
Oh,
yeah.
no.
Yeah, and so it's like a great start into horror movies.
Oh, and I can't handle that. You know, there's so much just religious upbringing has just ingrained some ideas in my brain about certain things. Ouija boards. I don't think I'm ever going to watch a movie with a Ouija board. Anything that feels too close to what has been like hammered into my head, I cannot handle that. But I do watch a lot of analysis of those whenever things are being like dissected, I guess, going back to that. But whenever things are just being, you know, cut apart and into little pieces, and I can watch that all day. I love analysis of horror, but I can't watch horror. It's just too easy for me to get involved, and I get spooked.
And I've been able to cross that line with film, but I haven't been able to in video games. That is, it's one thing watching a character be in this situation and like, you know, at least to some extent, I'm able to be like, sucks for you, but at least I'm not in there. In a video game, you are in there.
Absolutely.
And so like, even video games that like aren't necessarily horror games, but like have horror elements are still just like, oh, damn it. So like BioShock 1.
Oh yeah.
Has some horror stuff in it. And then Half-Life 2, the like whole Ravenholm section, which is just a zombie survival horror game just in the middle of this like first person shooter. And so that is a lot harder to get into because it is me.
Yeah, I've not played a single horror game. I don't think. I almost played Dead Space 2. Again, that was another one that I love the lore. I love talking about it, but man, video games are way too involved.
It's a whole other thing.
Way too involved. Even Last of Us was oof.
Did you actually play Last of Us?
Yeah. That was during my almost game journalist phase. Horrible phase of my life. I was not a good person at that point, but I enjoyed that game and it scared the life out of me.
Yeah. And that's actually something, speaking of like being scared, is that the true horror in media doesn't actually come from the horror that the characters are experiencing, but more so of like how it is possible in your own life.
Oh yeah.
So like, I don't know if you've watched Hereditary.
I've watched enough of it. I've watched enough. I've seen I've seen the thing. I've seen I've seen the horror of it.
Yeah. And right, like the scariest part of that movie isn't like, spoilers for Hereditary, the demon stuff that happens at the end, which is pretty terrifying anyways. But the beginning is like, oh, this is just like kids trying to go to a party with his friends and like has to bring his sister along, and like, oh, she's going to like anaphylactic shock, and she's like, and then like he gets home and like just like lies in his bed and just waits for his mom to like find the car. That is like, that to me is the more terrifying part, which is like, this could happen to you in the real world. And that, like, what do you do? What can you do? And what he did is exactly what anyone would do, which is nothing. You can't do anything.
It's the horror kind of relies on your, you know, your experience before the horror. So things that I think generally in America we have whether we want to admit it or not, most of us have some, like, deep down inside of us, we have a fear that the ghosts are real. So whenever we go into these movies, we're coming in with that in the back of our heads, like, oh man, once I leave this theater, this exact thing might happen to me. Maybe there's a ghost in my house. And yeah, that part of horror is just oof.
Yeah,
I can't.
It's
handle
what
it.
comes with you.
Yeah, I cannot handle that.
Yeah, the filmmakers don't actually have to make it that scary because the rest comes from you. or whatever other media, even like scary books. And that's a weird thing too, is that like suspense and like when you're reading, you're just reading it. Like it can't like physically surprise you, you know, but like it still is like, oh crap, like what is about to happen? And like you can't help but keep reading, and like you're continuing to put yourself there as you read.
It's just when you become, it's like that way. It's more like a video game, reading a book, like, because you're in the process. You have to keep pushing it. A movie, you sit in front of the movie will keep going, no matter what you do.
You can cover your face.
Yeah, but that book, you have to read the next word and the next one, and no, I don't want to believe that's going to happen. It's definitely not going to happen. And then it happens, and it's like, oh, well, now that's in your brain, and you put it there.
You did that. Yeah, I think that you've probably gone over the medium is the message, the McLuhan thing.
Not that's not ringing a bell.
Okay, well, Marshall McLuhan, like, he wrote a book or like a dissertation or whatever, but like the whole point is that the medium is the message. And so it's like the things that make the medium what it is greatly contribute to or are even just part of the message that the thing is trying to do. So it's like if you're trying to send a message about like anti-consumerism, but you make it as a movie, it's saying something very different if you're trying to say something about anti-consumerism as a art installation.
I hear.
And so, yeah, the medium is the message. And so like based on the mediums that we're using, we can actually convey a very different message in and of itself. So we're musicians, and so we're sort of required to make decorations for time rather than space. Although we can do that by making a music video or, again, an art installation. But like each of those things says something. If you like, oh, I make music, but it's only in a cassette, that definitely says something. And it doesn't really matter what's on the cassette at that point because you've made your message clear. I forget where I was going with that point, but like something about how just media and consumption, I guess.
Whew. That's another place where my brain's been. It's just our culture of consumption. Yeah, it's interesting. The media being the message. The consumption. What does the consumption mean? Like, in the same way that the media is the message, what we consume is also sort of what makes us. And also what kind of how we define our lives is increasingly, more about the products that we buy. I have to write an essay about Blade Runner 2049, which I love Blade Runner. And so something that's just been, I'm trying to find a way into it, but something that came to mind was just like, in cyberpunk worlds, what you buy, how you augment yourself it becomes part of you, and how you define yourself is what you consume, what you buy. And we experience that on obviously a smaller, lesser scale in reality. But yeah, that's an interesting.
Yeah. Well, kind of playing with that thought, we're already cyborgs.
Yeah.
We like the information that we used to contain in our heads is now contained on that. And we're just delegating more and more information that used to be in our heads to the device. And it is a part of us. When it is missing, we feel incomplete.
Definitely. Absolutely.
So, I mean, like, yeah, we're already there. We're already cyborgs. And also, as a side note, I think Blade Runner 2049 is like the best sequel of anything I think I've ever seen. I've never known anything to like so perfectly follow up on a thing and greatly honor the original thing while expanding on it.
Yeah, it is a miracle that movie came out the way it did. Like, but then, you know, the team that was working on, you know, Denis Villeneuve, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and the original writer, is it Hampton, something like Hampton Framcher or some, it's I know I just butchered that name, but it's I've been looking at that name all day, but I can't remember what it is. But yeah, the team behind that is like incredible. Denis Villeneuve, again, I think we just touched Arrival, but like that is another movie that's basically, I think, a perfect movie. I can't think of a bad time to watch it. I'll watch it any day of the week, anytime. Put Arrival in front of me, I'll watch it. It's really good.
Yeah. And something that you could do to like actually learn that language is to just like learn Lakota.
Oh yeah.
A language that is out of time and like I don't know how one would learn Lakota. That might be a different thing, but like, yeah, just the concept of.
Is it a language that's still being used?
Yeah, I mean, very limited. It's I went down this rabbit hole of. I found an organization, I guess, is they keep track of endangered languages, and yeah, they had like a whole like map to like show, oh, these are all the different places that have like, and like it shows how many people are known to speak the language, and there's some in there that are just like 12.
Still going.
Yeah,
Still
right.
going.
So it's like that is critically endangered language versus like, oh, 1,000 people speak this language. It's like it's still really small, but it's not quite gonna be extinct yet, and that's a neat thing. It's just even language at all of like we spend so much time focusing on like how we structure things and how we communicate as poetically and extravagantly as possible in one language, and then you just throw it into something else and you just start from nothing again. Not necessarily nothing, but because the concepts and ideas are still in your head, you just then have to find a way of communicating them.
Yeah. But I mean, even the concepts, you know, just if you, let's say, you know, you've grown up in the desert and you've never seen a penguin, you just don't have a word for penguin. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but that's something that I was thinking of when I was driving or something. Like, yeah, I've just never seen a penguin. You just have no concept of a penguin. And if somebody told you there's a penguin coming, you just have no idea what that means. You have just no frame of reference, just a blank spot. And if somebody told you when a penguin did show up that's a dolphin, you never seen a dolphin. Well, now your concept for dolphin and and penguin are all mixed up. Yeah. And language is just so strange and so cool.
Well, I mean, that's probably what happened to indigenous people when the Europeans came, is like, hey, there's going to be some people coming. Not that there was someone like warning, but like there's going to be some people coming. They're going to be wearing shiny armor. They're going to be in these like, these canoes you have, but you're going to have that, but like giant. and they're going to have like things that they hold in their hand, and they're really loud and they cause death. And then after they come, you're all going to get really sick, and most of you are going to die. And then they're going to take the rest of you as slaves. You don't even have a concept for slavery, but like basically they're going to make you work. And it's like, I don't know most of what you just said to me, so I don't know how to handle this. And then, yeah, they didn't know how to handle this.
Just thinking about the horror of that again, like just that's really quite, it's pretty horrifying. And then even in the work, you know, what does it mean to be working for someone who is making money? You're not making money. They're making money, which is their economy, which is their concept. And now you're in a system that is built against you, that is not built for you. You have no access to it, and you're just trapped in this nightmare. That's, yeah, when you put it in those terms, it's already horrific, but it's even more like, oof, that's a lot. That's a lot.
And I mean, the sort of outrage that comes around sort of like critical race theory and like what that is. And it's like a legal way of analyzing race.
Big fan. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of critical race theory.
That's pretty much what it is. People don't like that because it might just make them have to come to terms with the fact that like, oh yeah, the whole structure of this has made it to where some people did not have a way in for generations. And we're still seeing the effects of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like an obvious thing, but it just really blows my mind that, you know, the same people who are like, you know, heritage, not hate, who cling so much to this concept of heritage that you inherit something, you get something from the past, have no room for a concept that other people who are not like them inherited something else. They inherited, their inheritance was slavery. Their inheritance was that pain that their parents experienced, and that their ancestors experienced, and that they're still experiencing that's their heritage. It's frustrating. That is something that, the more I learn, the more frustrated I become about that. And I try my best to, you know, keep my head on me and just, you know, try to communicate it in
a way that won't. Yeah. And that's the difficult part about like the concept of like angry black man, of like,
I mean, a really angry non-white person. If you're in the United States and you're not white, there's some injustice that you are inheriting. Like you're something is not. And even I shouldn't exclude all. I'm not saying all white people, but it's because then when we talk about class, then it gets very broad, and it then becomes a different kind of critique that I also like. But I don't think we want to get into the. I'm not super well versed on class stuff, but it's something that I'm learning about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of these different ways by which we measure the differences in each other, and I find it to be a double-edged sword in that the more we focus on our differences, the more we focus on our differences. And so it's like, yes, because I am Hispanic, the thing things that make me me, and the sort of generational effect of that, and the fact that I'm an immigrant, and all these sort of factors like make me who I am. Yes. But also, I'm still just a human being like anyone else. And those things should be considered, but they should not also be the entirety of my being.
Yeah. That's and back to kind of the projects like CRT, at least my understanding of them is that what they're trying to do is to understand that that these things they're intersecting and they're crossing over, and sometimes they don't matter, and sometimes they matter a lot. And yeah, it just, identity is such a strange and complicated thing. But if we're all focusing on race, then, maybe we can learn to focus on it in the same way. Mm-hmm. Can we all learn to understand, try to understand each other to a positive end, rather than, than other ends. And,
well, this actually does kind of go back to that like conquering mentality thing of like, you can have things be different and not have things be hierarchical. Like they can just be different. And that's that. Like we have this analogy of like, oh, comparing apples to oranges. But it's like, I don't think people understand what that means, which is like, you can't rank an orange among apples because it's not an apple. And they're different things. You can't say that like an apple is better than an orange the same way that you could say that like, oh, like white people are better than black people. It's just like there are differences.
Yeah, like what's the motive of the
comparison?
Yeah, that's ultimately the thing that it comes down to, because if you approach it as you're looking at apples and oranges and just see them as different things, then I think that's an example of like a healthier view. But if you're trying to figure out, which one's better, you acknowledge that they're different, but you still want to know.
Right. And for some reason, what comes to mind is like IQ.
Yeah.
So IQ measures intelligence quotient. That's what it means. But like, why is it a number? And when it's higher, it's better. And when it's lower, it's worse. And what does it actually measure? Because it says that it measures intelligence, but like someone who is, like went to Oxford and like has a super high IQ or whatever, you plop them in a rainforest with a knife and like the clothes on their back. What good is IQ there? Someone who is indigenous to that rainforest, you plop them in that very same rainforest, they're very smart all of a sudden.
Yeah. And again, if people who take IQ super seriously, I think they need CRT the most, because the whole thing is understanding that these IQ tests were made by somebody who had a motive, who had it's a quotient. It's not designed for you to understand, Japanese literature.
Sure.
It's designed to see how well do you understand, how well do you understand
these things that we're measuring,
these specific things that we've chosen, and there's a bias in our choosing. So there's to break those things down, you need these critical theories. It doesn't have to be critical race theory. I mean, there's so many different, just critical theory, and critical race theory just happens to be another one.
Yeah. Like we should be questioning the premise. That's actually like that's one of my things. I might be wrong. Is is like question the premise, understand that you don't know everything, and that there could be something else that you could learn. And so one interesting thing is that, like, whenever you said that, like, oh, we're like annexing knowledge, before you said that, you were like, this might be the most insane thing I've thought. But it's like, no, it's a good thing to like go that far, keep going and keep questioning even more premises, because it's like, you don't know what you can question until you like go all the way out. And I mean, you could Descartes the thing and just like go all the way down and then like somehow prove God again. But like, I mean, it's at least he like tried, you know, like went all the way down. And so, yeah, like I think therefore I am is something. It is like, if nothing else, I'm here. I'm capable of experiencing this thought. Therefore, I probably exist. That's a groundbreaking thought, man.
That's I think it's funny that now that, you know, that I think therefore I am is so like normalized in our culture that it sounds like, it's like, well, obviously, yeah. You know, but how hard he had to work to get to that, to get to those words. I think therefore I am, you know, there's no, you know, that work is almost, you know, completely forgotten, which is, I just find that interesting. Like,
yeah, well, I think we live in an age where we summarize as much as possible. There's just too many things to consume. And so just give me the smallest condensation of a thing. And I'm just going to assume that I know what it is.
Mm. Yeah, I do that. I do that.
Yeah, we all do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we do lose some, you know, again, this is back to signs and signifiers. Talk about, you know, there's always something being brought in, something new being brought in, and something dying away, something, you know, being lost in translation, but the translation creates something new. Oh man, that stuff just, it's fun. I don't know.
Yeah. Going with this just like last thought of summarizing things. How am I going to title this episode? I don't know.
I have no idea.
Bannister, thank you so much for doing this with me.
All right, thank you for having me. This is wonderful. This is.
Where can we find you and your things?
You can find me and my things on Spotify and Apple Music, and also on my Bandcamp, which is bannisterchaava.bandcamp.com.
Sweet. And I guess the like central hub right now for musicians is Instagram, I guess.
Yeah, Instagram is not Bannister. Yeah. That's my handle, not Bannister. One word.
Why not Bannister? I know it's like dumb to ask anyone any of their screen names, but like I thought it was clever, and I stole it from Ryan Higa, who is I think he was not Ryan Higa at some point. Yeah. Bannister, thank you so much. I'm Santiago Ramones.
I'm Bannister Chaava.
This track title has an umlaut in it, so let's see if I can pronounce it correctly. This is Supergüd II by Bannister Chaava.
Sure, I guess I could just wake up feeling super good, but I don't, and I won't. You know how will I lie if you don't? Soon you will. And I guess sometimes I wish that I could sit and cry. So I rock and I roll, and I get all of this stuff looking in control. Living is a tough gig to swallow. guess it has its perks sometimes. Maybe you could show me the ropes, elevate me. I'm afraid to say, I think about it every day. Push it down, get it down, and never, ever, ever, ever let it out. Living is a tough gig to swing. I guess we'll make it as we go. I just wanna show you the road and elevate you, baby. Elevate you. Na, na, living is a tough gig to swing. I guess we'll make it as we go. I just wanna show you the rope and elevate. It's okay, I'm fine. I'm just a little tired. I'm fine, it's alright. I'm okay, I'm fine. I just need something. I just need something. I just need something. I just need something.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music and produce audio. The music you're hearing now is music I made. You can listen to official releases by Santiago Ramones on Spotify, Apple Music, and the other streaming places. Or you can buy it on Bandcamp because a single purchase is the monetary equivalent of streaming it all day, every day, for about a week. I'm working on an album, so if you'd like to hear that at some point, you can buy my music, or you can support me on Patreon. There's a Discord server in which we discuss deep topics from the podcast, but it's also a community of beautiful human beings. All the links to all my things are on my website, santiagoramones.com. If you like the podcast, leave comments on social media, leave reviews saying how much you like the podcast, and tell your friends about it. I want to help the world have deeper conversations. So thank you for listening to and supporting Mid-Depth. I always end the podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.